Okay, so we're already live on YouTube.
Awesome.
So this session, the plan is to do some live coding as if it's the work that I'm echoing, sorry. So we're going to live code as if it's the normal work that Tristan and I do. So I'll introduce ourselves. So I'm James. I'm pretty new to GitLab. I'm in the Monitor Respond team, as is Tristan. So we're both front-end engineers, and we're going to be working on a specific issue that's mentioned in the agenda, but I'll also make a comment on YouTube to show what the issue is we're working on. But do you want to also introduce yourself, Tristan?
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I'm Tristan, front-end engineer on the Monitor team. I've been with the company for coming up 4 years, and I'm based in New Zealand.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I should also say I'm based in Berlin from Australia, and Tristan taught me how to code, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. So the idea today is the issue we're doing is not super straightforward. Like, we had to make some decisions on why we would use the particular solution that we are going to implement. So we had some conversation, you can see on the issue itself, on should we use tabs or should we use the router in a different way. So we've had this conversation mostly asynchronously, some meetings where we've talked about it, and so yeah, we're gonna implement that now. So today's session, Tristan will drive and I will navigate. So yeah, Tristan will share a screen, and feel free to jump in with any questions. Whenever you want.
Cool. Yeah, so here's the issue that we're talking about today. There's a little bit of background, so I'll touch on like a few different things before we get into the coding. So within GitLab, you've got this concept of incidents. It's kind of like an issue if you've used GitLab issues with some extra features and yeah, for a slightly different use case. So like one feature that we added recently is a timeline. And there's like a really quick demo of it here actually, where you can see this is an incident. It has some tabs. One of the tabs is the timeline. You can add entries. The main, yeah, and then this is showing a bug that that we will hopefully fix by the end of today. Yeah, and this timeline will be used in the case of like if an incident happens to your website or like web application that you're running, or some kind of like online service that causes you to have like an outage or some other kind of interruption, then perhaps you'll have a workflow where in that scenario an incident gets created. Your DevOps engineers might add stuff to the timeline to say, yep, the incident was first noticed, at 8 p.m. But actually at 6 p.m. this like disk space alarms started going off. So you add that to the timeline, and through that you can get a picture of maybe what the cause was, what actions people are taking, so you don't step on each other's toes, and like, yeah, basically help you resolve the incident as quickly as possible. Yeah, and what was just shown was on like the main like activity on an issue or on an incident, it might include a link to that timeline event. But as of right now, if you click that, it doesn't go anywhere, and that's an issue. Yeah, so it seems like kind of like it should be an easy fix where we just have to add like I'm not sure if you can see in the URL at the top there, but it's got the incident and then like a hash and then a timeline item. So you think it might be as simple as just adding that ID to an element, and then the browser's like normal hash navigation would take over, but unfortunately it's not that simple. And I'll just quickly show in my live environment. I have an incident here. Yeah, and it one of the reasons it's not that simple is you might click that link from this page where the timeline tab isn't open. So the browser doesn't know to open the timeline tab automatically. We'll have to like handle that somehow. And you also want to be able to like load a event directly in the URL and have it automatically go to the right tab when you load this page, because by default it goes to the summary tab. Yeah, so those are like some challenges. Yeah, and then as a result of that, we had like a brief sort of discussion and investigation into the issue. And one idea that was put forward was using View Router to solve this problem. And View Router would provide some like additional functionality around manipulating URL and like reading from the URL that the fact that you want to navigate to a specific tab on the page. Yeah, so that's kind of where we landed. Is this all making sense so far, James? Have I missed anything?
No, it's
cool.
Great background.
Yeah, so we had this sort of discussion, and we thought, why not try out View Router and see how far we get. And I had like a little investigation on like its branch, and it does seem like it would solve the problem for us. Yeah, so today I might show a little bit of that, like starting a new branch, adding View Router to the page, and yeah, and sort of show like my workflow and show how yeah, I run tests locally and things like that, just whatever's useful.
Hi guys.
Yep.
Hey Lee, thanks for joining.
Hey Lee.
Thanks for the invite. I just wanted to ask a quick question. Would your approach normally be to read the documentation and kind of figure it out as you go, or would you find somewhere in the code base where you're maybe already doing what you're trying to achieve and borrow some already solved solutions, so to speak?
That's a great question, and the answer is kind of to do both of those things. I had a look at the documentation, and I also looked at existing parts of the code base. Well, in this case, it was more useful to look at what had been done in code, because we've used the router on several other pages in various ways. Yeah, so I could show some of that, like how I even went about looking in the code base and stuff, if that's useful. As
I
like a
think that
starting
thought,
point for this.
yeah, I think that thought process is really interesting. I've shared a link to a component that I've worked on that does something really, really similar.
Oh yeah.
So you know, but I think a huge part of this session is for you to kind of share what's in your head and help people to understand how they so it's probably important we don't skip too many steps, but this component,
Yeah, for sure.
has a few routes set up. It's got a root of view at the bottom, and there's a few route links in there that take you sort of back and forward. It's a little bit different because this opens in a drawer at the side of the screen, and there's kind of a main content view, and then the drawer is the bit that varies depending on the URL and the link that you click. But I think the way this is implemented would be pretty much the same as what you'll be looking for.
Yeah.
I did look at the merge. Sorry, Tristan.
No, you go, James. Yeah.
We did look at the merge request page because it's the most obviously similar and should be like, you know, like on the merge request, the behavior should be the same as what you'd expect on an issue or an incident in this state. So the merge request, the router there was really quite complex and not really something we could easily move over to the issue or incident section.
Yeah.
So this was a bad example, was it, of how to achieve what you want?
Yeah, like this is the behavior that we want. You can see like it's using the router, it's not using tabs. And this is one of the reasons why we said, okay, we need to use the router, not tabs. And the difference in like the user experience is like, so if you go to commits, Tristan, then you have like the issue ID in the URL and then /commits. Whereas if it was tabs, it would be issue ID tabs question mark commits. Or sorry, question mark tabs equals commits. Using
and you're
URL
referring to there's this default behavior in the well, not default, but provided behavior in the GitLab UI tab component. Oh, whoops, sorry. Here we go. Where I don't know if it's even, is it documented by us or just by Bootstrap? It's a prop that you can provide that allows you to do navigation. Is it this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So each tab will then appear in the URL. I don't think I could show it because
so it's the
this is an iframe, but
with query params, and then you can give a name as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I see these two. Yeah, cool.
So if you don't give a name, it's just the numbers of the tab.
Yeah. Yeah. So this approach wasn't ideal just because of that. The UX of the user experience of the URL is kind of different to what we want. And then in say merge requests, this does have the behavior that we want, but the implementation of this is as James said, more complex than we are hoping for. I think this is the way this is done is already being flagged as something that would be nice to refactor, but essentially I believe the contents of each tab is a different HAML entry point, and the merge request tabs kind of wrap that whole thing. So it's not done in Vue.js, which means there's a lot of like additional JavaScript that's doing manual DOM manipulation and stuff. And yeah, it would be nicer to do it in Vue if possible, because in our case we're dealing with things that are all Vue components. Like the summary is a Vue component, timeline is a Vue component. So yeah, that was the thought, and we didn't want to introduce any code that would already need to be refactored if possible. Yeah, and I did find a similar use case, which is alerts. There's just a slight difference. Oh, it's loading. In that it uses hash navigation, so it has this this hash in the URL. So if I switch to another tab, it still has a hash before the last slash. So part of my, like, one of my goals, I guess, with implementing that is figure out if we can do away with the hash, particularly because our use case is this adding an anchor, but you link to an anchor with a hash. So I don't think it would work. I haven't tried this actually, but I don't think the browser would like it if we had like hash / timeline and then hash again, and then the timeline, the actual timeline event.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the reason that it's been done that way was to sort of save a bit of extra effort on the back end, because you would need to configure additional routes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think they've maybe deliberately done that. So if you copy one of those links directly to one of those tabs, the bit of the URL that's actually interpreted by the back end is everything prior to the slash. The hash.
That's
so
correct. Yeah.
I think that probably made the back end piece a little bit easier. Where you might have to make a change to the back end routes. I'm not sure what's already in place for the timeline.
No, that's right. To fully complete this solution, without the hash, we would need to change the backend slightly. But luckily it's not a huge change to add extra routes for something like a sub page.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm not like a backend person, so I don't know if I would have the best solution, but I know at least I know a clumsy way to do it, and we can start with that and bring in someone from the back end before we merge it.
Again, I think for that other component that I've pointed out, we could find the MR if we need to, and the relevant routes that we added to achieve that.
Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something, Jane?
So we did find a similar issue. We talked about a similar issue that people could, if they wanted to try their own solution, they could do that, and that was with the alerts. But do you mean the issue that we linked to? Is it you can find it in the agenda or on YouTube, but is it to remove that hash? Is that what the issue is?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's to remove the hash and to allow back navigation.
Right.
Because right now forward and back doesn't take you between the tabs, and it could be nice if it did. If each tab ends up being a separate URL, it would be kind of expected that if you click back, it takes you back to the previous one, not back to the previous backend URL. Because as a user, there's no distinction between, apart from the lack of a refresh. But yeah, I think you want to be able to have metrics add to the history and then be able to go back to the alert details, or to even just to reload the page when you're on metrics and have it remembered that. without needing the hash. Yeah, so that's just like a small sort of usability improvement just to make the URL a little bit nicer. Yeah.
Great.
And
So if
yeah,
anyone wants
that
to
issue is in the agenda. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to tackle that, you can learn what we're doing here and then also ask us for any help you want.
Yeah, this is it here. I made it just today as I was looking at the alerts page. Yeah, so maybe we'll dive into some code for this. So I'm on master at the moment. From just earlier today, it's a little bit behind, but it's close enough. I'll make a new branch, I think. Let's say incident timeline router. And then let's have a look in the code base to see what that incident tab is doing currently. So this file is in charge of the tabs and the tab behavior. So we can see there's actually should be another tab, which I think might appear if I reload. I've been switching branches a lot this afternoon. Yeah, here we go. There's also a metrics tab. Yeah,
Was
we
that
can
not loading
upload
before because
images.
it's like why was that?
Oh,
not loading?
I think it's because I changed branch without refreshing the page. Because this is the metrics tab actually loads. Oh, yes, slightly interesting actually. This is it here. It does a deferred import. So it actually doesn't load immediately when you load the page, or when you load the JavaScript bundle. There's like the main JavaScript bundle that this like tabs file gets included in, and then for a strange reason we load the metrics tab later. Yeah,
I've never seen that.
yeah. We do that. It's more common to see this in like tests and stuff, but we do that in the code base a few times in a few places. One advantage is that I think the reason why we do it is this is quite a heavy bundle. It's pulling in the entire like charting library. And at one point we were doing like some performance cleanup to make to reduce the size of entry points, and we worked out that this was a big dependency. And
so we only load the tab if there is something in the metrics.
We only load the tab if it's an incident page. So that's the other interesting thing about this. There's like some shared code between issues and incidents. So if I go to issues and click one, it actually loads the incident stuff because it realizes that this is an incident. Yeah, so
in the list of issues, it shows incidences and issues. Right?
Yes, that's right. Oh yeah, so I'm loading an issue that's not an incident. And oh, this is a work item. We've got all sorts of different issues in there, or issue like things. Work item is another one, but I think I think this isn't. Oh, here we go. I actually made one called. Yeah, here's one. This is not an incident, it's an issue, but 90% of the code is the same. It's using the same JavaScript files and the same components. It just isn't loading some of the incident stuff. Yeah. So you arguably, instead of only importing and instead of only deferring the metrics, we could defer all of the incident stuff. That could be another valid approach, but the bulk of the dependency size is in the metrics because it shows charts and the charting library is large. So yeah, it was primarily like a performance decision, the bundle size. And 99% of the time when you're loading an issue, it's probably not going to be an incident. So then this saves a lot of megabytes, both on the server and on all of the users who have to download it. Yeah. Yeah, good bit of sidetrack, but really good question. Yeah. Yeah, so that's why the tab was not loading.
So sorry, it wasn't loading then because there was no metric on that incident. It wasn't loading? Or like why was the other branch not having it?
I'm not sure actually.
Okay.
I wouldn't know exactly why, but my gut says that it's because of that deferred loading, that the dependency never appeared, so then the tab just didn't render.
Yeah, no worries. Cool.
Yeah, so for some reason it'll be to do with the like the Webpack hot reload that we use. I would have switched branches, the hot reload will kick in. It'll try and update the page without doing a full refresh, but somewhere along the way that deferred import got lost. Yeah, it's not uncommon that features like that sometimes don't interact fully seamlessly with hot reloading, because hot reloading is kind of doing a lot of magic in the client. So yeah, sometimes if you see random bugs like that, sometimes a refresh just fixes it.
Yeah, and they're not bugs we'd see in the live code. It's just because we're running it locally. Yeah, on the GPK.
Yeah, exactly. The hot reloader only runs in the local dev environment. And yeah, just in order to make it so you don't have to refresh the page every time you update some code.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, so right now we have these tabs, and they do switch stuff, but it's not doing anything in the URL. Yeah, so maybe the first thing we want to do, what I do if I was working on this, is I would add a router, and then I would attach some debug points or console logs just to see if I can get it to recognize the like tab switching. Yeah, so this is where the alert page is going to be a good help for us. Because if we look at alert details.view, we should expect to see some router stuff happening in here, because we know that there's a router in place in the front end. So if I search, it's quite a large file. So if I search route, I can see a couple of places. Yeah, that's it. So there's some stuff where it's interacting with a $route, $router. This to me is like an immediate clue as to how we might introduce the router, even without looking at the the view router docs, whenever you see this $, it means it's this is something that exists for the entire Vue app. It's just kind of like it's not a rule, it's like a pattern that things follow. You'll also see it with Apollo, if we have Apollo in this. Yeah, so Apollo, you can see is $Apollo. And the way these $ things get attached in Vue is in the base Vue app. So if we go up to where we're saying new Vue, so this is, I was in alert details, and then going up the tree to the like index.js. This is where the Vue app's being made, and we can see it's adding an Apollo provider. This is like the normal way to integrate Apollo, and it's also adding a router at the base level. Yeah, so if we wanted to add a router in our use case, we're going to have to do a similar thing. Yeah, stop me if that doesn't make sense, because
No, that makes sense.
it might be a bit fast, but yeah, so we can see in the imports we are creating a router here, right when the page gets first run.
So this is creating a router within this Vue app, but there might be another router that is a parent to this Vue app.
The Vue app, so not the component, but the app. An app is always the highest level.
Yeah. So above this, the route would be handled by the XAML files.
Yeah, above this, there's just XAML and like raw JavaScript. Yeah, so like on a given page, we would have multiple Vue apps. So there's like a Vue app for the main part of the issue. There's a Vue app for the sidebar.
A really good way to see this is the Vue
Vue DevTools.
DevTools. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I haven't looked at those for a while actually. Why am I not seeing the Vue panel? I don't know why I'm not seeing the Vue panel there. That's odd.
I never used it in Firefox.
I have that problem quite often as well. Sometimes if you just close the DevTools and reopen them, it will appear. I just wanted to call out quickly the where I've fallen down a rabbit hole in the past, that the Vue this $root is nothing to do with Vue router. And you saw there that was this $root and this $router. This $router is all to do with the Vue router, and this $root is just more of an underlying. I think that's almost like window.location. So yeah, this $root is, I think, always available. This $router is only available if a Vue router has been kind of loaded or mounted or whatever the terminology is.
Right. Yeah. That's new information for me. I just assumed that they were both added by the router. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of Vue apps being loaded on any given page. You can see there's a bunch of sidebar ones. There's one for the top nav, and there'll be one for the issue itself. Yeah, it may not be a named one as well. They don't always get named. Oh yeah, interesting. That one's just like that whole Vue app's just a button.
So
Yeah.
does that mean like each Vue app, like not, we can only have one router on the page, right? We have to route.
We can have one. Well, this would seem like we can have one router per Vue app, if we
Right.
like. Or because it's created, the router is created outside of the app, in this index.js. So it's created up here. You could conceivably give that router to several Vue apps. They would all share a router.
Okay.
So they
And then
could
they're
see
using the same URL. Yeah.
Yeah. So that might be what we end up doing. Yeah. So it looks like we need to take a look at this create router function. And yeah, here we can see it's importing Vue router, which is what we would hope. It's doing this view.use thing, which I don't actually fully understand, but is required for certain like plugins and libraries that we use with Vue. I think it's just telling the global view that we are integrating the router so that it can activate certain features maybe, or certain like prerequisites can get loaded into the global Vue like config, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I'd suspect it's something like that, like setting some global config. And then yeah, we create the router and it's being passed like a few options. And then these options are going to be interesting to us for the router that we're going to use on the incident page. Yeah, so at this point, it would probably be interesting to see if there already is a router being used by issues. So we could go have a look at the issue entry point. So this was the entry point, the sort of JavaScript entry point for the alert page. So I'll hop on over to the index.js for issues.
Sorry,
and this is
just for my info there. How did you find that so fast?
Just from memory, I know that I just happen to know that the issue page is called issues/show.
Okay. Show is not typical.
No,
like
it's not.
Naming. Yeah, cool.
I think that's from Rails, that naming convention, and we don't seem to do that anymore for new pages, but issue being one of the oldest ones happens to have show in it. Yeah, if you were to look at like the Rails route docs, oh, actually, I don't know the exact page. Possibly this one. You can see like shows up. There's it's kind of like a Rails naming convention, where an individual page, they call that resource the show resource, and you have a controller for show, and then you might if you have like a list or like a base page, you might call that index. So you'd also have an index controller,
okay,
or a list controller. So show, that's where show comes from. Oh, here's like the full set of ones that I think Rails will actually automatically set these up for you if you like. So show, it's kind of like a naming convention in Rails for these different controllers that correspond to different pages. Yeah. and they kind of loosely correspond to like CRUD actions, if you're familiar with those.
I am not.
It's
Probably out of scope.
yeah, it's like a API. If for like backend people, they might know that when you have an API, you typically, for every resource, you have like create, remove, create, rename, update, delete, or something like that. There's like 4 like things. Create, read, update, delete.
I just popped a link in the chat that's really, really helpful. And I forget
Cool.
that link every single time I come to need it. But this lists all of the routes, and you can see a good example of if you scroll down somewhere, you'll see something that's got like the hash new, hash create, hash destroy, hash show, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't found one. Oh, here's like a /new. Yeah.
Yeah. What am I looking at that I can see? I'm happen to be looking at OAuth/authorizations. And if you scroll just to the right, for some reason yours is quite cropped out, but
yeah, that's strange.
But then you can see if you scroll,
show, update, destroy. Yeah,
that sort of thing. Yeah,
index. Yeah. And yeah, so for whatever reason in Rails, show kind of corresponds to, hey, you're looking at a single item, then they always load the show page. And then for that reason, it's some of our JavaScript has show /index in it.
In this case, a single item, you mean a single issue?
Yeah, so in the issues case, it's like a single issue. In the case of alert management, it's like a single alert. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that stuff's kind of like automatically set up by Rails, and then we just put a JavaScript file in the right place with that naming convention, and it will, the HAML, like when it loads the page, it will execute the HAML and it will like pull in that JavaScript file just because it's like named to be the same as that resource.
In the folder naming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Great.
Yeah, it's a bit strange if you haven't used Rails and you're trying to work out like where the JavaScript starts from. Yeah, so it's definitely useful to know if you're doing contributions and you're not having to get like that far up the JavaScript tree, that you want to find like the highest level entry point. Yeah, so in this case we have this this index.js for show on issues, and this is gonna be what creates the issue app. So we've got an issue app which does the new view. So there's always a new view at the top level of every view app. And in this file, there's actually a few of them. We're also creating a separate app for the header actions and a one for stack traces. There's like a widget that can sometimes be shown on issues that as a stack trace. And then we also have the incident app. So this is where we would need to add the router. So we would do something like const router equals create router, and then this will be added into the view app, similarly to how we've already done it for Apollo. yeah, and this will add a router to that view app. And then once we're in the view app, we can go like this $$ router and we can see stuff. Yeah, so we need to create this. Let's just call it router for now.
So we're making a new
Oh.
router here. We're not reusing another one. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We'll create a new one because it will probably have some incident specific stuff in it. Maybe we'll place it inside.
So do we need to make sure
incidents.
there's no like conflicting router, or
Oh, yes,
how would we make sure that?
correct. That's actually what we were here for. Pretty much just looking at the view app, there is not already a router. So that tells me that we're safe.
So if another view app on the same page has a router, they don't need to share it.
No, they could have separate routers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll see a little bit of how that works once we dive into it, because there is some configuration you provide to a router, which is the base, which tells it at which point in the URL, because you have like a long URL, at which point does the router start caring about the URL.
Okay, great. Yeah,
that
makes sense.
possibly doesn't make full sense, but like for an example in the alert management case, all of this like initial stuff is not important for the router. It only really cares about that last like / overview. So we would set the preceding stuff as the base, and then the router only attaches to that last section. Yeah, but the interesting thing with the router is you could tell it that the base ends at alert management, and then it would take over. It would kind of take control of the two and the / details and stuff. So
Which
if you push,
we don't want, because
in this
a
case,
different
no,
router is
yeah,
doing that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
No worries.
but it will be important for when we want to reload the page, because the router needs to initialize itself at that point. And instead of just having like issue /7, we're going to have issue /7 /timeline, and that base tells it that up to the 7 is not its concern, and then everything after, so the /timeline, is the concern of the router. So it will sort of attach itself at that point.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So we have index.js. We're gonna add a new router file here, which we've done. And initially, I think I'm just going to use the alert router directly.
You broke up there. Say that again.
Oh, and initially I'll just use this alert router directly. So copy all the same code over, because I think apart from the hash, which we can change, I think it makes sense so far. Yeah, because it has some base functionality. We can pass in a base. Yeah, which will probably look slightly different, but yeah.
So the gone.relative URL path, that's everything up until the hash that we noticed.
Yeah, it is.
That's coming from the Haml, the Ruby.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some parts of this that aren't going to be perfect, but it'll work initially. Yeah, so I'll save that, and then we probably want something to check that we are using the router. So in incident tabs, we in mounted say I'll just console log the router and we can have a look at what properties exist for that. Yeah, so I'll reload, switch that off. This .router root is undefined. Fix issuable titles now. I'm not sure that that one's related.
Did console log it though, above the welcome to GitLab?
Oh, it did. Yeah, cool. So we've possibly broken something, but yeah, you're right. It logged the router. Yeah, so that looks like it worked. We have the router on the page. So I could even commit this. That all looks relevant. Sorry, I added on another screen. To incident new app. And I can push and
So when it said mode hash, is that the issue that we were seeing before in the alerts page where we had the hash before?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and you can actually see when I've reloaded, it's added a hash / to the URL.
But we don't want hash, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so we can do that next.
Okay.
I'll just push to a new branch. I should probably set this thing like it's helpfully suggesting, but I haven't. And yeah, it's going to run the hooks.
I've never seen that suggestion. That's super useful.
Yeah, I want neither. So I wonder if that's new, but oh yeah, it doesn't like console statements, of course. Yeah, since we're showing what we were just doing, like daily development, there's like either I could disable this for that line if I still want to push it. I don't really want to remove it right now. I could use a debug statement in the browser instead of a console log. So I could in the debugger, don't know what that is, but I could find the correct file, add a debug statement. There's a lot going on there, but oh no, Alt P, is it? Yeah. So here, Command P opens this thing. I could like jump to the incident tabs. Cool. And then I could go down to that line, or just above it, I could add a debug statement here. Then I could remove this console log. And then I could even put a watch expression on the start router. Yeah, so that's one way of like getting around this issue. The other way
I've never used a Control P before. I always just do a global search with a unique looking line of code.
Yeah, oh nice. Yeah, that works too. Yeah, Command P, I think it's the same as like VS Code.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I guess they implemented the same shortcut, which is nice. Then people just don't really have to do it. Don't really have to, yeah, sort of learn. Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to quickly show is if you want to skip this, you can do no verify. And also, because I know the pipeline will fail, you can do CI skip if you don't want to run the pipeline. That might be a useful little tip that people don't know about.
Is this like pre-push hook? Is it new?
Yeah, it's relatively new. I think it's maybe 2 weeks old or a month old.
Okay, cool. Because I didn't see it when I first started, and then it just all of a sudden appeared in my GDK. It's useful, but I wasn't sure if I accidentally set it up or if it just arrived one day.
No, it is useful. It's good because it saves like running big CI jobs that you know are going to fail. And things like linting and stuff can run relatively quickly locally, so it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Not everyone likes it, so no verify is always there, and CI skip. This is kind of how, for me personally, before we had this hook, if I was like pushing something that I knew was going to fail the pipelines, I'll just add that CI skip option.
And the reason we're pushing it is so that we can share the code so far, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you wanted to show someone else, in this case, we want to show anyone that wants to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we'll be slightly naughty and just skip the hook for now.
So I've used this in cases where, like, I don't know why my code isn't working and I want to ask for help. And I want to ask for help with the specific code so people can read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Really useful for that case. And
also helpful for like asking for help asynchronously, I think. Because usually like in a usual office environment, you just call the person and share your screen. But in this case, it'll be a Slack message to the channel, or if you're a community in the Discord or in the Gitter, where you can post, or in an issue or a merge request as well, where you can post to say like, here's the issue I'm having, here's the problem I'm having, here's the code, any ideas?
Yeah. I'll just quickly make it. Actually, I guess this is like maintenance. It could be feature. Because we are going to add the hash stuff by the end.
I haven't added the labels like this before.
Yeah, this is in shorthand. One of the many / commands that you can run. Table flip is one. Yeah, I often use probably the label one is the one I use the most because I find it's a lot of clicks to use the drop down. Especially if you know you don't have to search, you just know what the label is.
Another neat tip, although I'm not sure if it'll work for community contributors, but if you name your branch starting with the issue number, then the metadata will automatically copy over from the issue. So all of the labels and milestone, and I can't think if there's anything else. But
oh, nice! I didn't know about that one actually. That's a really good tip. Yeah.
So could we add it now, or does it have to be the branch name? Like, is it the?
It's probably too late now.
Cool. No worries,
I could push a new branch as an option, but yeah, that's a good tip. Definitely add that one. Are you writing any of these down on the agenda, or could be useful?
That's a good idea. I will. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll also maybe mention the ci.skip.
I'll
if you want it to be super efficient, you can even pass something to tell it to create the merge request for you, can't you?
When you push?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't ever do it, but those push options are awesome, and I know you can do some more powerful stuff than just sort of skipping. But
I think we support quite a lot of the merge request workflow just through the CI, the command line interface, which is cool. Yeah, but me personally, I just use that link that gets suggested, and then if we want to follow along with the changes as we go, that's it there. So next is probably what James suggested, which is to update the hash to be history. So the view 3 router docs.
Sorry, one question, Lee. This functionality to add the metadata to your merge request, I assume if it's set up for GitLab team members, you can set that up in your own repo to do that automatically.
Do you know what? I think it's baked in functionality. I don't think it uses any kind of what do I call it, webhooks or any magic. I'm just going to look it up in the docs quickly and see if I can share a link.
So that would mean if you're on your own repo and you're addressing an issue in your repo, adding that issue number to your merge request, it will automatically carry over the metadata.
Bingo. Yeah.
To the branch name. Oh wait, it was the branch name, right?
So
Right.
Yeah, nice. I've learned something already today. Yeah. So going back to router, if we just make this history, I think that will remove the hash. Oops. As simple as that. So it did insert an extra slash, which is interesting. So that tells me the router is still doing something. And then this page, for some reason, it's taking a long while. Like the GDK definitely does this sometimes. So we have a router. We are in the tab page. We are interacting with the router in a minor way already. I've lost it already. Oh wait, I'm in the wrong file. In mounted. So we know that the router's there. Now we can look at maybe what is the alert page doing with the router. So it's got a couple of things it's doing. It's computing an active tab, which looks like this. So what it looks like is happening is when the tab is clicked. So let's see where this is being used. So GL tabs has an input event and a value property, which you can combine into vModel. So that whenever you either need to read, like the tabs need to read the tab index or set the tab index, it will go up to this property, which is cleverly, you can define it and compute it with vModel, and you can write a setter and a getter, and these will run every time this is set or get, which is like a nice integration.
I don't quite understand how this one works.
So normally with vModel, looks like my entire browser's crashed. That's interesting.
Was that one that you were looking at there, Tristan? That's the implementation elsewhere, or is that the current code? That wasn't the current code on the timeline, was it?
No, this is an alert
Cool.
details.
No, I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure. So
yeah.
Go ahead on your explanation, but I just want to caveat that I'm not sure that this is the route that we'll want to go down.
Okay. Yeah, there's definitely a few ways we could implement this. I like this approach because it allows us to continue using GL tabs without having to switch. Like we could switch to GL nav, then we'd need to reskin GL nav. It was something we had talked about doing. That nav is, oh no, my browser's just completely gone. Oh, there we go.
When you say reskin GL nav, you mean like add the functionality to GitLab UI that we want to use here?
Yeah. So if we want to keep the look and feel of the tabs, which is what's in the design, then the GL tabs component is the easiest way. And then if we use GL tabs, we can use this vModel to effectively subscribe to any updates, and also we can use it to force the tab to change based on what is in the router.
That makes sense, because we can pass in a specific.
Yeah, because it's vModel, it's both reading and writing to the current tab index. So if something else changes the tab index, the UI will automatically update to reflect that. Or we're also giving control to the tabs component to change the tab index, which it does when you click different tabs. Yeah, the view docs have a really good breakdown of vModel. It's basically when you have an input event as well as a value on a component.
So the simple case for this is in data, you have like a simple string or number that changes easy. So the get is just what is it now, and the set is just updated. But this is different because like, why is this different? Why do we need to specify the get and the set?
Right. Because we want to do a side effect on one of those. Yeah, you're right. That's a good question.
So this is instead of a watch. So another option would be you watch the current tab index and then you update the component. Instead of that, when you update the tab component, you also update something, the router in this case.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
So it's kind of combining what would normally be several pieces of code into one place.
That makes sense.
So when we want to read the tab index, we're going to say what is the active tab, which is like, I think this is string, which is like slash, in the alerts case, it'll be like slash metrics and slash, I forget what the other tabs are, summary and stuff. So the return value of this is a string. And then, the return value of this is a Boolean. Active tabs is a string. Then it will find the index of that string that's returned in the config, and then it will give back a number because what the tabs component takes in GitLab UI is like 0 for the first tab, 1 is the second tab, 2 is the third tab. Those are the indexes. So like, I guess to demonstrate, if I say, let's look at the view.
Sorry to
GitLab UI
interrupt
docs
before
on
we
this.
move on. We are
Yeah.
pretty over time, so if you want to,
True,
maybe we can
yeah.
take a break and then can decide if we want to keep going or pick it up another time. Also fine.
Yeah, that sounds good. We could also maybe say finish in 15 minutes or something, just wherever we get to.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll finish up
Cool.
in 15 minutes. Cool.
Yeah, because unfortunately I don't have much longer. Yeah, so we're looking at tabs, and I'm not sure if it's in these docs or the Bootstrap docs, but essentially there's this input event. If you input the number 0, it will switch to the first tab, is effectively how this works. And then I think that's all explained in the Bootstrap view docs. And that's essentially what we're doing.
Just to clarify, like we're looking at the Bootstrap view docs because GitLab UI is based on, for the most part, Bootstrap view.
Yep.
So if the GitLab UI docs are incomplete, you can refer to Bootstrap view.
Yeah, it's a good point to mention. A lot of the components that we have in GitLab UI are they sort of wrap some Bootstrap view functionality. In some cases, it's as simple as we just provide our own style, or in other cases, it's like adding new functionality. Yeah. I'll be interested to see if there's a V model example. Yeah, programmatically activating, deactivating tabs. That's actually what we want to do. Oh no, it's not. We don't want to activate, but we want to like navigate to and from tabs. So yeah, an external control is like a good example of this, where you're clicking some unrelated button and it's like changing a tab view. And yeah, if you have the data tab index and you view model that, this would be like the normal way without the getters and setters. Then this, and then yeah, you mutate that value. Then V model will just read those updates and react accordingly.
So the only reason why we're using the get and set is because we're not using the number, we're using the string.
Not quite. We are essentially boiling the string down to a number.
Okay.
And then but we want to link it with the router at the same time. Yeah, so what we do instead of only storing the tab index, we store the active tab as the string. When we want to read the tab index, we just sort of boil down the active tab into whatever that number should be. Mm-hmm. And then in the other direction, when we set it, so this happens when you click a tab, it will set the tab index. We actually want to fire off something on the router to say, oh, someone's clicked on a tab, let's add that tab ID to the URL. to
Yep.
make sure that
Okay.
they're still in sync. Yeah. And the other thing that this active tab does, by having it separately, we can say if there's no param tab ID, which will be the case on the first load of the page, because the router is just like in its default state, then we make the active tab the first tab. So that's the 0 in the list of tabs. And then that way, when the tabs read, they read the active tab to see which tab is active, then it's that first one by default.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Lee, you mentioned before this might not be the route we want to go.
Yeah, it's bugging me, this. I think I might reach out for some other opinions, but View Router provides this awesome what's it called? I've got it open in front of me, so let me just scroll down. Router View, how amusing. So yeah, View Router provides Router View, which is almost like an iframe, is how I picture it in my head. It's kind of like a placeholder where View Router will load whatever it wants to load, or whatever you want it to load. So it's, you kind of put a placeholder in, like pretend it's a div or an iframe or whatever, and you call it Router View. Then when you tell View Router what all of its routes are, and if you like if I do /timeline, you want it to load this component into Router View. If you do /details or /metrics or so you tell it for each route which component you want it to load. So then it does everything for you. But if we want to use tabs, that's where it's these two things kind of in my head aren't really playing together. We need to think, like, should we, like, I wonder if rather than tabs, if they should just be buttons that look like tabs, because tabs.
That's right. Yeah.
You see where I'm
we
going,
actually
right?
It's exactly right. And we did talk about that in the original discussion.
Sorry, I should have read the back.
No, we kind of skimmed over it. I mean, that's definitely another thing we should investigate. There is just some. The only thing is that there is some complexity on the page that might cause some issues with that. So one example is that that would definitely work for the View apps that get displayed by these buttons. But then we have this like web of other things that also get affected by the tabs. So these sections here, like below even this edited, and then below, some of these are in different View apps, and I'm not sure yet if we can take the router into those View apps and whether that will just work. Maybe they have their own routers. Probably not, because it doesn't look like they're doing anything with routing.
Yeah,
but,
I guess I saw the summary tab, almost the top content of the summary tab as being one View component, the metrics tab content being another View component, the timeline. If each of those is a component that wraps obviously lots of little components, the tasks and the links and the reactions and the etc., then Router View Router would just work natively out of the box.
It would, and that would be the ideal approach. That may still end up being the solution. So that's kind of an open question in my mind of like, can the router be exported to these other apps? And there's also kind of a third.
Sorry.
The third issue with that is that some of these aren't even in view. They're just in Haml. So that, I mean, no matter which way you end up configuring the router, it's not going to work.
So there's going to be some hacky JavaScript somehow from the Haml to know whether to show or hide.
Yeah, that's right. And you can see the existing method in all of its glory, where it's
beautiful.
yeah. So this is, I probably should have showed this at the start. This is kind of another benefit of adding the router is not just to get the sort of hash anchor stuff working, but also it would be nice to remove as much of this as possible and replace it with router. But yeah, I think you're right in that the router view component definitely warrants investigation. And I am probably going down a rabbit hole with the way that it was implemented on alerts.
After you sort of bringing all of those issues up, I think that we love iteration, right? So I think that actually where you're going will maybe be like a baby step in the right direction, to be like, well, if we add view router and we use view router to kind of manipulate the URL, provide the history, allow you to link directly to where you want to go, it's a step in the right direction. And then at a later stage, if we can leverage router view and remove some more of the, I don't know what to call it, bastardization or hackiness or whatever, then brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think both ways are definitely worth checking out. And both could be made iterable as well. Like if you went down the approach of using the router view component, you could initially just leave this as is, and then find, like, iteratively go through each of these selectors and see if they can be replaced. Some of them, that approach definitely would work for sure, because the edit button, for example, is in the same view app. So that one could be done.
Cool.
Yeah, it's not in the tabs, it's above, but that's the perfect candidate for the router view because it's already in the same view app, and tabs aren't taking care of it. So by using router view, it would be a direct improvement. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. We've got 5 minutes left. Do we want to keep looking at code, or is it maybe something? Did we cover all the questions?
Yeah, there weren't any other questions added, I think.
Yeah.
So we touched on like interacting with GitLab UI and adding the functionality there where we need it. So maybe it would be useful to talk about this a little bit, because one option we have is with the tabs, we could use, if we could update how GitLab UI uses tabs to be more in line with like what we want elsewhere. Because if we don't want, if here we don't want to use URL query params, just like !tab equals summary or whatever. If we don't want that here, we probably don't want that anywhere on GitLab. So then it would be useful to update the GitLab UI tabs to behave the way we'd expect it to everywhere.
I wonder if there's any issue with kind of baking view router stuff into a GitLab UI component.
Yeah, that's my first thought as well. Is I guess it would be interesting to know if the GitLab UI already includes the router for anything. So we could have a look at the package JSON. Doesn't look like it. although it is possible, it's also pulled in from Bootstrap, and we didn't list it as a dependency, but
it feels like something that
that's unlikely.
We might be more likely to make a component in GitLab rather than in GitLab UI. So when we've got stuff that,
true, yeah,
I don't know if you call it tightly coupled, if that's the right word, but there's a few core components that, or one that I've worked with especially recently, that's like a table list, which has got tabs, it's got counts in all of those tabs, it's got sorting and filtering, it's got like a search bar, like the issues screen, got all of this stuff built in, but it's too kind of tightly coupled to be part of GitLab UI, so it's a component within GitLab instead.
And the place where those live is this view shared folder, and there's actually one for EE as well, I believe.
But I love that idea of having a reusable, I guess, I don't know what we'd call it, but like a tabs component that massively leverages view router, rather than, I guess, I don't know how view router really works behind the scenes, but rather than at the moment, I guess all the data's on the screen, but just kind of well, no, I suppose it's doing the same thing, but we're manually having to add VIFs to all of the relevant components and bits and pieces to conditionally show or hide them, rather than using view router, which is built for exactly that job.
Yeah, it's one of the difficulties of having something like GitLab UI, where it's a third-party framework that, in theory, is reusable outside of GitLab. And then you have things that sort of cross over into a little bit too specific of a use case to include in such a general library. Or in the case of the router, I think it would need like that base URL that I was talking about earlier. So it wouldn't be, you couldn't fully encapsulate it. You'd need to provide some config to it. And at that point, you may as well bring it into GitLab, because that's going to be config about like the current page that you're on or whatever in GitLab. I mean, definitely that could still be reusable in itself, but I think the usefulness is slightly decreased at that point.
Makes sense. So if we need to provide a config, then it should be in GitLab, not GitLab UI.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Or even just if it diverges enough from from the goal of GitLab UI, which is like a reusable UI library.
It might be when Tristan, are you sort of a maintainer on GitLab UI?
No.
You know, okay. I'm just it might be something that if we kind of consult the team, that we find that actually it is something that they'd like in that suite.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure where you draw the line.
It could even be in the issue list already. Be worth like having a wee look sometime at this list, and like maybe that feature's already been requested.
Cool. So we're out of time. Seems like a good place to stop it. So I'm going to end the live stream now. So we're going to try to do more live coding sessions. So stay tuned, I guess.